The first thing my mother said wasn't, "Are you okay?" It was, "Don't expect us to save you. This is on you." I stood barefoot across the street, staring at the flames swallowing the only home I'd ever owned. Firefighters rushed past me, dragging hoses through my front yard while thick black smoke rolled into the night sky. 15 years of overtime shifts, skipped vacations, and careful budgeting disappeared behind walls of fire. "Moms," I whispered into my phone, "I barely made it out." "You've always been careless," she snapped. "If you burned your own house down, don't come crying to us." I couldn't even answer. Before I could speak again, my father took the phone. "We warned you about that old place," he said flatly. "This is your mistake, Linda, deal with it." Then he hung up. Not one of them asked whether I was hurt. Not one of them asked where I was going to sleep. As I watched firefighters break through my living room windows, I realized something even colder than the fire itself. My family had already decided I was guilty. The flames finally died down just before dawn, leaving behind nothing but charred beams, twisted metal, and the smell of wet ash. Neighbors slowly drifted back into their homes while I stood frozen behind the yellow caution tape, unable to believe the place I'd spent years building was gone. One firefighter approached me gently. "I'm sorry," he said. "The fire marshal will need to speak with you tomorrow." I nodded, but I barely heard him. That night, I checked into the cheapest motel I could find. The clerk looked at my soot-covered clothes and smoke-stained face without asking questions. I carried a plastic grocery bag, holding the few things I'd managed to grab before escaping: my wallet, my phone, and the car keys that somehow hadn't melted in my pocket. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my living room collapsing into flames. The next morning, I drove straight to the county fire investigation office. The fire marshal introduced himself with a firm handshake and invited me into a quiet interview room. His voice was calm, professional, and completely different from the accusations I'd heard all night. "We're still gathering evidence," he said. "I just need to ask a few questions." I answered everything honestly. Where I'd been, when I'd left the house, who knew my work schedule. Then he paused. "Ms. Carter," he asked, looking directly at me, "who else had access to your house last week?" I frowned. "No one. You didn't loan anyone a key?" "No." I hesitated. "Well, no one who would actually go inside." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached beside his chair, picked up a sealed evidence bag, and carefully placed it on the table between us. Inside was a scorched metal key tag. The edges were blackened from the fire, but I recognized it instantly. My heart stopped. That wasn't my key tag. It belonged to my brother Eric's storage locker. The fire marshal folded his hands. "Can you explain," he asked quietly, "why this was recovered from the room where your fire started?" Eric answered on the third ring. "Hey," he said casually, "I heard about the fire." I gripped the phone tighter. "You already heard. Mum called me." There wasn't a trace of surprise in his voice. "I just met with the fire marshal," I said. "He found something inside the house." Eric laughed softly. "Linda, don't start looking for some big mystery. Those old houses have electrical problems all the time." I kept the wiring inspected. "Sure you did." His confidence irritated me. "You really think I caused this?" "I think you've been running yourself into the ground for years. You probably forgot something plugged in." Before I could answer, he ended the call. It felt less like talking to my brother, and more like listening to someone reading from a script. With nowhere else to go, I drove to my parents' house. Mum opened the door just enough to block the entrance. "You can't stay here," she said. "I wasn't asking forever." "It'll only be for a few days," I pleaded. "I have nowhere else." She folded her arms. "You've always wanted to prove you could do everything yourself. Figure this out yourself too." Dad appeared behind her. "We're not turning our home upside down because of your mistake." "My mistake?" I asked in disbelief. "The investigation isn't even finished." Dad shrugged. People don't lose houses for no reason. The door closed before I could say another word. Driving away, I couldn't stop thinking about how quickly they'd chosen Eric's version over mine. The next afternoon, I returned to the Fire Marshal's office. He slid the evidence photo toward me. The key tag wasn't dropped after the fire, he explained. It was buried beneath collapsed debris before firefighters entered. That tells us it was already inside when the fire started. I stared at the picture. Then a memory surfaced. A week before the fire, Eric had called while I was working a double shift. "Can I borrow your spare key?" he'd asked. "A package got delivered to your porch. I'll toss it inside so nobody steals it." I'd thanked him. I never asked for the key back. That evening, I searched through my home's security app. One notification caught my attention. Garage camera offline. Timestamp 5 days before the fire. I knew I hadn't disconnected it. The next morning, I showed the fire marshal the screenshot. He studied it for several seconds before looking back at me. "Linda," he said quietly, "I don't think this fire started the way your family wants you to believe." 2 days later, the insurance investigation began. Unlike the fire marshal, the insurance investigators wanted to hear from everyone connected to the property. They scheduled separate interviews with me, my parents, Eric, and even a few neighbors. I answered every question they asked. Eric, on the other hand, sounded completely certain of himself. "Linda has always been absent-minded," he said during his recorded interview. "She works long hours. I wouldn't be surprised if she left something running." My mother nodded from across the room. "She's stubborn," she added. "We've warned her for years to be more careful." Hearing those words repeated in an official setting hurt more than I expected. My own family wasn't just doubting me anymore, they were helping build the case against me. The rumors spread quickly. An aunt called to say she was sorry I had made such an expensive mistake. A cousin sent me a message asking if the insurance company was even going to pay for accidental negligence. Nobody asked what the investigators had actually found. They simply accepted Eric's version because it was easier than questioning him. Then everything changed during Eric's follow-up interview. One of the investigators placed a printed photograph on the table. "This image came from a neighbor's exterior security camera," she said. Eric glanced down. The photograph clearly showed his pickup truck parked in front of my house late at night, just 2 days before the fire. "You told us you hadn't been here in months," the investigator reminded him. Eric cleared his throat. "I remembered I stopped by to check on the place." "You were checking on it at 10:47 p.m. He shifted in his chair. "I was just making sure everything looked okay." The investigator didn't argue. She simply wrote something in her notes. The silence in the room suddenly felt heavier than any accusation. Later that afternoon, my insurance adjuster called me. "Ms. Carter," she said, "we're temporarily pausing your claim while the investigation continues." My heart sank. So I'm being punished because someone else can't keep their story straight. "This isn't a denial," she replied calmly. "It's a precaution. There are inconsistencies we have to resolve." For the first time, I wasn't worried the truth would stay hidden. I was worried someone was desperately trying to keep it buried. The following morning, the fire marshal called. "They've approved a search warrant," he said. "For what?" There was a brief pause. "Eric's storage locker." The search warrant was executed early the next morning. I wasn't allowed inside the storage facility, so I waited across the street in my car, watching investigators disappear through the security gate with evidence cases and cameras. Every minute felt longer than the last. Nearly 2 hours later, the fire marshal called. "We're finished here," he said. "Can you meet us at the office this afternoon?" His tone gave nothing away. When I arrived, several photographs were already spread across the conference table. He pointed to the first one. "We found these inside your brother's storage locker." The picture showed a collection of landscaping equipment. At first, I didn't understand why it mattered. Then he slid another photograph toward me. It showed several specialized tools covered in soot. We recovered matching tools from your garage after the fire, he explained. The serial numbers confirm they belong to the same equipment. I stared at the images in disbelief. Eric kept this stuff in my garage. The fire marshal nodded. We believe so. He opened another evidence folder. Inside were photographs of partially melted gasoline containers. Our laboratory found the same fuel residue at the fire's point of origin. Everything suddenly began fitting together. Eric hadn't just borrowed my spare key. He'd been using my property. The investigation moved quickly after that. Detectives interviewed neighbors again. One elderly couple remembered seeing Eric's truck parked outside my house several evenings while I was working overnight shifts. Another neighbor recalled hearing power tools coming from my garage long after dark. I assumed you'd hired someone, she told investigators. I hadn't hired anyone. The fire marshal placed a timeline on the table. It appears your brother lost access to his rented workshop several weeks before the fire. He pointed to each event one by one. He began storing equipment in your garage. He brought in a portable fuel-powered generator during a neighborhood power outage. He spilled gasoline while working. The fuel vapors ignited. He fled. He delayed reporting the fire. Every piece connected with the next until there were no missing gaps left. But Eric still refused to admit it. During another interview, he folded his arms and shook his head. You're twisting everything, he insisted. None of this proves I started that fire. My parents sat beside him. My mother looked directly at the investigators. You're trying to blame our son because Linda can't accept responsibility. The room fell silent. The fire marshal simply closed the case file. We've completed our reconstruction, he said. Tomorrow morning we'll present our findings to everyone involved. The next day we all gathered inside the conference room. Eric stood up, grabbed his jacket, and headed toward the door. I'm done wasting my time here. Before he could reach the handle, it swung open. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside. The room went completely silent. Eric stopped walking. One of the officers spoke first. Mr. Carter, we'd appreciate it if you stayed for the presentation. Eric forced a smile. I already told everyone I didn't do anything. The fire marshal remained seated. He opened the final case file and calmly looked around the room before speaking. Over the past several weeks, we've examined physical evidence, laboratory results, surveillance footage, witness statements, and interviews. He turned the first page. The fire did not begin because of faulty wiring. My father's confident expression disappeared. The fire marshal continued. It also did not begin because Ms. Carter left an appliance running. My mother slowly looked toward me but couldn't meet my eyes. He projected a diagram of my garage onto the screen. Our reconstruction shows that Mr. Carter had been using Ms. Carter's garage as an unauthorized repair space after losing access to his rented workshop. Another photograph appeared. It showed the portable fuel-powered generator investigators had recovered. During the neighborhood power outage, this generator was operated inside the garage, while gasoline was being handled nearby. Escaping fuel vapors ignited, causing the fire. The room remained perfectly still. The fire marshal picked up the scorched metal key tag. This storage locker tag fell from Mr. Carter's pocket during the incident. It became trapped beneath collapsing debris before firefighters arrived, which is why it survived the fire. He placed it back into the evidence bag. Combined with surveillance footage, witness testimony, matching tools recovered from both locations, laboratory analysis of the fuel residue, and contradictory interview statements, the evidence establishes responsibility. Eric's shoulders dropped. For the first time since the fire, he had nothing to say. One of the officers stepped beside him. Eric Carter, you're under arrest. He didn't resist. As they placed handcuffs on him, he finally lowered his head. My mother burst into tears. "We didn't know," she whispered. I looked at her quietly. "You never wanted to know." She reached toward me, but I took a step back. For days, I'd imagined this moment would make everything feel better. Instead, it only made one thing painfully clear. They had chosen Eric long before anyone discovered the truth. The arrest was only the beginning. Eric was charged with reckless conduct, making false statements during the investigation, and attempted insurance fraud after trying to support a false claim that I had caused the fire through negligence. A few weeks later, my insurance company officially cleared me of any responsibility and approved my claim. The adjuster called personally. "I'm sorry for everything you went through, Ms. Carter." "Thank you," I replied. "It means a lot to finally hear someone believe me." As news of the investigation spread through the family, the phone calls changed. The same relatives who had quietly blamed me now apologized. My aunt admitted she should have waited for the facts. My cousin confessed he'd repeated Eric's story without questioning it. I accepted their apologies, but I couldn't erase the memory of how quickly they had believed the worst about me. My parents found themselves answering uncomfortable questions instead. Relatives openly criticized them for defending Eric before the investigation was complete, and for abandoning the daughter who had spent years helping them whenever they needed it. Months later, I signed the papers on a smaller home. It wasn't as large as the one I'd lost, but every room represented a fresh start instead of another reminder of betrayal. The locksmith handed me 2 keys. I smiled and asked for only one. "No spare?" he asked. "No," I answered, "one is enough." I never gave another family member unrestricted access to my home. More importantly, I stopped believing that love had to be earned by sacrificing myself for people who would never do the same for me. The fire destroyed my house. The investigation exposed something far more valuable. It showed me exactly who was willing to let me lose everything to protect a lie. And once I knew that truth, I finally stopped trying to rebuild the family that had already chosen to burn the bridge between us.